the distinct pleasure, as always, of bringing on my co-founder and CEO of ListReports, Ajay Shah. And so, AJ, I'm bringing you on right now. Why don't you say hello and happy Monday to our agentpreneurs?
Hello, agentpreneurs. Happy Monday. How are you?
Happy Monday. I love that. AJ has this great rhetorical technique when we have our company meetings, and I'm surprised he didn't do it here. And he would go, Happy Monday, Happy Monday, Happy Monday. And it's
Right,
quite
right.
effective. You can save that one for next week, AJ.
We'll get that routine down.
We'll get that
Still.
routine down. Exactly. Fantastic. So, this is sort of, we'll call this Thought Leadership Mondays, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about what the future might look like. And I want everyone to hear your perspective on this. And so, when we talk, as we have sort of week over week, about working from home and the opportunities that are here with virtual and what that could mean for an agent in the future, over this weekend I was reading a lot of news, and we reported on one on Friday, frankly, about people moving out of big cities, not wanting to be in densely populated areas. Seattle, for example, took 20 miles of roads and converted them to pedestrian and cycling. And I don't know if they're afraid of a mass exodus, but why don't you talk a little bit about, let's start there, right? Like migration, right? What do you think is going to happen? What are people going to do? And is this short lived or is this here to stay?
There's a lot of conflicting debate going on in terms of whether or not this is a short-lived trend or whether this is here to stay. I do think that there are going to be a lot of companies who make it acceptable for people to work from a remote location. So they're going to have their corporate HQ, Google and Amazon and these big companies are going to still be located in Silicon Valley and the other office buildings that they have throughout the country and the world. But they're going to say, hey, you know what? If you're in some sort of remote place and you have talent to contribute, we're going to find a way to make it work. And I think that's one of the most significant shifts that are happening here. Now, we already had a problem where there were overpriced markets, extremely constrained inventory in markets like San Francisco and much of California and other big metropolitan areas. And so that was already happening, right? And so this uh, ability to start to move and migrate anywhere combined with the high housing prices means that probably secondary cities in particular, maybe even more rural, exurban areas are going to get a second look amongst consumers because they're going to say, hey, I can actually have a nest egg while I work for a company that can pay me, modern and substantial wages, right? And upper
Mm-hmm.
middle class kind of living at a lower price point. So I think that's going to happen. The big issue is we don't know, how big that is. But I have a feeling it's actually going to be one of the mega trends that come out of this COVID crisis.
Yeah, interesting. AJ, one of the things we actually just talked about before we came on air is a lot of people, and I think we're all seeing this because I keep hearing the stories. They're just like, you know what, screw it. I'm not taking the precautions I was before. Some people just blatantly and overtly, not doing anything to protect themselves. So is there a risk of a race to normalcy where some of these great benefits that we've seen just get erased because people want to go back to the way things used to be for psychological or other reasons? What's the risk of that happening?
I think there's already this palpable sense that people want this kind of return to normalcy, which by the way, whenever I hear that term, I always think, why do you want it to return to normal? Why not
Right.
return to better, right? Like,
Right.
take what's normal and make it better and return to that, right? This is an opportunity for change. But a lot of people want the comfort of feeling like they know what's going on and this return to normalcy. So there's going to be some of that, but the fact of the matter is that COVID's not going away anytime soon. We're going to be dealing with this at least for through 2020 and probably into 2021. So we're going to have these peaks and troughs. Is probably the best thinking I've seen on it in terms of we go through this and we start to see a spike and then we recoil in certain markets and geographies and then we break out of it and we rinse and repeat this cycle. But there's a big contingent of people, Randy, who are not ready and willing to go back to normal no matter what the government says. So they're not going to just pick up and start going out and about, going to movie theaters, going to things like this. And so this idea of a return to normalcy, even if some people do adopt this, there's going to be a percentage of people who can't, and probably shouldn't for whatever health reasons that they want to protect themselves from. And so, given that that's the case, what normalcy looks like is going to be very different for the rest of us, regardless, right? And so,
Hmm.
there is going to be some sort of modification to quote unquote normalcy.
Something that you just said, I really liked, right? Like, why would we want to return to normal? Why not, seek to return to better, right? And just practically speaking, I look around and, we've talked about this. There's less pollution, there's less traffic, there's less car accidents. Like, there's so many actually sort of silver linings to what's happening. And I think that's a really interesting perspective to say, let's return to better and not return to normal.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah.
This is the entrepreneurial mind, is to say, okay, well, what is the opportunity, not in an exploitive manner, but in a um, really sort of meta level, right? Like there must be some good that comes out of all this tragedy, and
Yes.
it's our job to find it, right? And so I believe that there's a lot of things that are going to be good that come out of it. More financial freedom and flexibility for people to live where and how and in means that they want to. I think that's going to come out of this.
Yeah.
And yes, there's going to be a tragic amount of loss, financial and health wise, along the way. But on the other side of this, much more flexibility, much more people being able to live where and how they want.
Yeah. So AJ, why is virtual still going to matter as people return to work, right? And pretty much every state has reopened to some degree, to varying degrees. I saw a funny story this morning. I don't know if you saw it, AJ, where there's this one street that straddles two states, and half of the street, has one set of rules, and the other half of the street has the other set of
So
rules.
funny.
Really mind-boggling kind of things. So why is it still going to matter when we all go back to whatever our life was or what it will be?
Why is it going to matter? Because the fact that matters is that we all is the key phrase there. Not we all are going to do anything, right?
Right.
And there are companies like us who have fully embraced virtual. We're never going back to normal. I mean, yes, we have an office and we're going to return back to it, but that's going to be optional. As far as I can tell, that's going to be optional from this point forward. If you want to go live somewhere and live a different life, you can do that and still work for List Reports. And so the economy and structural parts of it are just not going to come back to normal. There was a article I recently read about how high end restaurants have figured out delivery for the first time. There's this whole notion of the nuance around the experience around high end restaurants, and a lot of high end restaurants, particularly in places like New York and so on, they didn't want to concede this because it's the whole atmosphere that they're going for that's priced into the experience of eating at these places.
Yeah.
And right now they don't have a choice, right? So they're actually saying, okay, how do we create new forms of packaging and delivery and experiences that can happen where I can have my friends over at my house and have a similar experience with my friends or family? So, some of these innovations and ingenuity are going to just simply last, and that's going to be the new routine and reality of the world. And so, if we had everybody 100% sort of embarking on a push to return to normal, we would see a return to normal. At best case, you're going to have some sort of hybridized situation, which means you're going to have to serve the lowest common denominator. And in that case, the lowest common denominator is the delivery, it's the virtual, it's the
Yeah.
stuff that is happening as it is happening now.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. You're absolutely right. I mean, recently I needed something from Best Buy and I needed it right away, right?
Mhm.
And I ordered it online and they found it in the store and I drove up and I showed my ID and they put it in my trunk and I left and I was like, why would I ever go back into the store ever again? Like that was a much superior experience.
Great experience, right? Like, yeah, they should have offered that before. Quite
Absolutely. That's kind of how I felt. And they better
honestly.
never get rid of it, right? Because that's
Right.
absolutely how I want to buy things now in certain cases. So, I think we have deep conviction that those who really master and focus on conducting their business online are going to have a distinct advantage. So talk about that as people wrestle with this balance and sort of what to do. Talk about, from your perspective, really the role in creating a differentiated service and advantage in this kind of virtual world.
Yeah. So that's the truth of the matter, is that virtual, for all the things that are negative about it, and it is, there have been a lot of articles and research about, hey, there's this kind of Zoom fatigue, right? Like it's hard to be on screen. and you have to be more cognitive, more aware. It uses different parts of the brain that we naturally as humans don't exercise as often. So there's a lot of things that are negative about it, right? But there is a huge advantage to it, and that is that it is super efficient.
Yeah.
It teleports you to anywhere in the world right away, where you can have a realistic conversation with people. You don't convey all the same things you do in terms of body language and everything else. But if you think about any mass shift at the time that it happened, people were deeply skeptical. Think about
Mm.
the era before telemarketing, and someone decided. And in fact, there's some really good stories if you want to Google them about the Sears catalog and how that
Hmm.
created the first sort of virtual version of shopping, right?
Right.
And what they did in all of the debates and discussions about whether people would actually ever order from a catalog, right, mailed to them. And then when you got into the telemarketing era, which is now a multi $100 billion industry, right? Telesales, telemarketing. It just seemed like no one's going to pick up the phone and talk to an anonymous person on the other side
Right.
and have a conversation. But major things are sold that way. Now you move into the area of video based, and this gives us even more of an ability to get intimate and trusting of another individual, right? And so that cultural barrier has been broken in terms of letting someone into your house virtually, right? And seeing what's going on. So now that that's there, it's also being met with significant skepticism in terms of what it can do. And certainly there are limits to the technology and what's capable. But since it brings such efficiency, economically, I find it hard to believe that people are going to abandon that and strictly go back to the old way.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And to pick a couple, to drive this point home, to pick a couple more recent examples than the Sears catalog, AJ, which is, I'm getting a kick out of that. Airbnb, Uber, right? The idea that you would just go into some stranger's house and sleep there, right? The idea that you get into some stranger's car and they'll drive you somewhere it was crazy, right? In fact, there are some great stories about their first pitch. I think Uber's first pitch in their deck, and it was just like, who's going to do this? It sounded
Right.
ridiculous, and now it just feels like normal. So AJ, we have, I think, formulating and developing every day a better and bigger vision for what a virtual agent is. Like, what does that actually mean? How is somebody going to conduct their business? We're calling them the modern agents. So, what does the modern agent look like to you, AJ?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of things outside of the showing of the house and the physical presence of the house that an agent does, right? So, they are obviously dealing with document signings and document management, process and status updates. They're presenting data and information to consumers. They're educating consumers about different parts of the process and different things that the consumer needs to know, and they're coordinating with and collaborating with lots of vendors and service providers. All of those pieces, I think, have an opportunity to be dramatically improved along the way, right? And the consumer experience, which is what it all comes down to at the end, is how does a consumer experience the services that you're providing? There's a dramatic ability to improve those things. That's what actually we're at List Reports. We're going to be spending most of our product capital on is how do we make these amazing consumer experiences. Now, they can happen in person, to be sure, but we think that a lot of these are going to be conducted remotely because it's just more efficient for both parties. And in particular, consumers are used to that. The more that this feels like an e-commerce experience, the better. To your point about Best Buy or another company that we've all heard of, Amazon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think about when Amazon came onto the scene in the mid 90s. I think it was 96 or
Mm-hmm.
97. The idea of putting down your credit card and buying something online was a really foreign
Ridiculous.
concept,
Yeah.
right?
And that, by the
We
way, that
now
lasted for a very long time, AJ,
a
right?
long
That
time.
resistance from like our parents, for example, lasted many, many years.
Now, today, most people feel like it's more convenient to shop on Amazon than most retail services. So, retailers benefit sometimes from instantaneousness, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
from the experience of just going out that people want to
Yes.
have that sort of tactile sense. But lots of times, going to a retailer is a chore. And
Yeah.
Amazon sort of takes all that away because they know what you want to buy. They make it easy to rebuy. You can ship stuff, you get it same day, next day. And so the point is that you have to reinvent the experience around these things, right, in order to make them work. In the case of Amazon, it was really important for them to crack the code on making it feel okay to provide your credit card, because at the time people were scared about that. And that was even when credit card companies were willing to reimburse you if in fact there was fraud on your account or
Yeah.
what have you. But even then, despite that, consumers were afraid. So Amazon had to make it feel safe in order for a consumer to do this. But in the process of doing that and then widening the selection to just about every product and SKU under the sun, they made a much, much, much better experience. The question is, as it relates to real estate and what happens here, what is the equivalent of making it safe, right? And then what is the equivalent of that dramatic consumer experience that Amazon provided? And figuring and formulating that is what we're working on here at List Reports, but we think is also the future of the real estate industry.
Yeah, no, I think that's really well said, AJ. I mean, we're envisioning and, in fact, building this entire platform where, as an agent, you have the freedom and the flexibility to operate day, night, whenever works for you and works for your consumers. And importantly, as we've been talking about, we keep hearing this time and time again that a consumer acceptance of this. They're not going to feel slighted that you don't want to meet them. They'll be excited that you don't want to meet them because you can connect with them virtually. And as an agent, you can provide an amazing experience around education, transaction, and home search, and all of those pieces. So I think you've painted a really nice picture for that, AJ. AJ, as we wrap up here, is there anything else you want to say to our agents?
Well, and sorry, just real quick
Oh,
on that
please.
last point. We already know that the younger you are, the more you tend to want to do that anyway. So, this idea of what we in the industry call asynchronous conversations, that is, conversations that are not happening at the same time, but can happen on your own schedule, where you can send me a message and I can receive that message and I can send something back to you, which I think is dreadfully slow in a lot of cases. But that's kind of how this next generation is wired also, right? So a lot of these technologies work a lot better for where the audience is emerging. I think you said now that millennials are not only the largest set of home buyers and sellers, but they are also basically competitive in terms of median price
Yeah, for
with
the first time
bigger.
ever with baby boomers. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
So that change is happening at that level, and then just imagine the next generation down, right, from there. So that continues. So I guess my only point is this: we have a product now called List Reports Live. It's free to all real estate agents on our platform. It's a way to start to get used to the idea of video conferencing. Try it with somebody. Try it with a friend if you need to. If you're not comfortable with it, just turn it on, try it on, and see how it works. And then what we're going to be doing is releasing different types of parts of your job that you're going to be that are going to be made available to you, so that you can start to do your job better through video conferencing. But try it out. Figure out how to do a screen share for the first time, right? If you've never shared your screen,
Yes.
lots of quirky things about that. Like, oh, when I do a screen share, maybe I don't want my private messages to be seen, right? So you have to clean up your desktop and turn off notifications. And so you want to get familiar with all of the just the courtesy and the process of doing a proper video conferencing, right? And that takes time to learn that. So I encourage agents to do it now. It is going to be, even if you don't believe it's the future, and you don't need to believe it if you don't want to. It's going to be part of the future,
Yeah.
and you are not going to be able to address the full sum of possible customers unless you do that.
Yeah. Well said. AJ, I'm remiss. I missed this. You wore your uniform today, so
I know.
congratulations for doing that. Thank you.
Thank Just for you. Just for
Just for
you.
me. Awesome. AJ, why don't you say goodbye to all of the agents out there watching live and who are going to watch this recorded? I always appreciate your leadership and your thoughts.
Agents, it's always honestly my privilege and honor to talk to you. I hope some of this is good, valuable information, and we're always happy to follow up with you. So we have our social media channels. We have please use those. We have
Yes,
people attentive to that. We will answer questions that you've got and do our best to support you in this industry.
that's fantastic. All right, AJ. Until next week, we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Um, Well, that was awesome. As always, really great advice. Really great look into how we see the future and AJ's leadership around that. As you said, we have a product, ListReports Live. It's free. It's video conferencing. Give it a shot. Try it out. Go ahead and use that. And you've gotten a little bit of color now, I think, around how we are going to continue to develop and build out that product towards, as AJ said, what we think is a return to a better world, right? A better future. So thank you for that, AJ. With that, we're going to wrap up the show. Remember to come back tomorrow, 11 a.m. right here on Facebook. CJ Singh, who's the president of Pad Styler, is going to talk about setting the stage for virtual transactions and virtual staging as a component of that. And frankly, a pretty cool one. I've seen a lot of these images. We've been testing with some of them. And virtual staging is not only more cost effective, it gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of the styles that you present. And it looks pretty darn good. So until then, be safe, be healthy, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.